In my opinion, springtime can be the trickiest time to deal with crabgrass. I'm going to explain in this video what you need to know to deal with your crabgrass, and I'm going to show you the products that I'm using and let you know how to use them on your own lawn. Let's get started right now. So it's raining outside. I've been relegated to my workshop and I'm going to be talking about crabgrass control in the spring. Today's video is sponsored by my friends at Graham Spray Equipment. The spray rig on the back of my truck was built by Graham Spray Equipment in Douglasville, Georgia. You can check them out at grahamse.com. Let's talk about crabgrass because there's some things that change in the springtime that's very important for you to be successful in controlling crabgrass. And I've personally changed my strategy over the year on how to best control crabgrass. So I want to tell you what I used to do, and I want to tell you what I'm doing now, and let you decide which one of those options is best for you in trying to control crabgrass. Crabgrass control game changes in the spring. And you can base it on this shrub right here. You see the shrub, and again, it's been raining a lot. So this is called Forsythia. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but you see the blooms on there and they're starting to fall on the ground. Typically, this is what I was taught, that by the time those Forsythia blooms start falling on the ground is when the crabgrass germinates. So you can see this one's almost all green with almost no blooms. If you're familiar with this shrub, it'll have tons of blooms when it's just a woody shrub early in the year. And the reason I show you that shrub is because a lot of times people say crabgrass germinates when the soil temperature reaches 55 degrees, for which I believe is true. But it's hard unless you have a soil thermometer to know when that is. So practically speaking, when you start seeing air temperatures get up in the 70s consistently, and my understanding is that if the soil temperature reaches 55 and then we get a cold night and goes back down, probably not a whole lot of germination has happened. So when it stays at 55 for several days. So if you get that week where you've got several days in the, low to mid 70s and it's not getting down as cold at night, then, and again, you start seeing a lot of stuff blooming, including those Forsythia plants, then you know the crabgrass, if it's not germinated yet, it's about to. And with crabgrass control, as well as a lot of weeds, the best way to control it is with a pre-emergent herbicide. So ideally, you sprayed your pre-emergent on the lawn before it germinates. So let's say in my area, I'm in the Birmingham, Alabama market, it's typically going to germinate sometime early to mid-March. It could be late February if we get a little bit warmer weather. It could be pushed back if we have some colder weather. But typically it's early to mid-March. So what I do for my customers is I'm out spraying my pre-emergent in January and February. And I think if I can get them all sprayed before mid-February, then I should be good on crabgrass, because when I put the pre-emergent out before mid-February, you almost have no crabgrass in the lawn, which is a great thing. It's not only cheaper, but it's also more effective to control crabgrass with a pre-emergent. So if you're able to do that before the crabgrass germinates, then I use a product called prodiamine. You can see here Resolute, and the active ingredient there is prodiamine. So this is what I'm putting out January and February. This is a 65 WG. I'm putting this out at 0.85 pounds per acre early in the year. I mix it with post-emergence to help control the existing weeds. So I'm using atrazine and a product called Triplet. It's going to help with the dandelions, a lot of cool season weeds, clover and things like that you're going to see in the lawn, henbit. But this product is what I'm using to get ahead of the crabgrass. Now, let's say that you're afraid that you're starting to see Bradford pear trees blooming and the blooms are falling off of the Forsythia plant, and you're afraid that the crabgrass is already germinated. What are your options at that point? Well, sometimes it's hard to see the crabgrass unless you get down on your hands and knees in a lawn that was covered in crabgrass the year before. Then you might can see some baby crabgrass. But in that situation, you got a few options. One thing you can do is use a herbicide called Dimension. I don't have that one to show you, but I'm just not a product I'm using much anymore. But what it does, it has some pre and post-emergent activity on crabgrass. So Dimension can be effective, let's say Dimension can be effective in the early stages of the life of crabgrass. So it's going to be a little bit more expensive product than the prodiamine, but let's say you start getting new customers for your lawn business in March, then you may go with Dimension. And I would say just, you might do that from March through the end of April. Again, I'm basing on the time frame for me here in Birmingham, Alabama. Those are going to vary depending on where you live. But after that, the crabgrass is probably to a stage that the dimension is not going to be very effective in controlling it. So the advantage of the dimension, again, it's going to work as both a pre and a post-emergent. So it haven't germinated yet, should get some good control, but if it's already germinated, it's in a small early stage, it has the potential to kill the crabgrass in that stage as well. A couple of years ago, I changed my strategy on that. Like, what I decided to do is, again, starting early March in my time frame, depending on when I think the crabgrass is germinated or is about to germinate. And just to note, your pre-emergent is going to need to be watered in before that germination says. So just go ahead and get it out early. I mean, if you can, I know you may be watching this video a little bit late, but like next year, it's okay, again, in the Birmingham, Alabama market, to put it out in January and get ahead of the crabgrass, which may be germinated in March, and get it down, it's watered in, and you know you're pretty good on crabgrass for that. Now again, a pre-emergent is not going to help you with a bunch of perennial weeds, which there may be a lot of those in lawns as well, but it can definitely make a huge difference on the annual weeds. So what I'm doing now, instead of using dimension, I'm using a combination of the pre-emergent and a post-emergent for crabgrass. So let me show you the products. I'm still going with the prodiamine and putting it in the tank, and still using the triplet to help control weeds. Now the atrazine you want to take out when the grass starts turning green. So when I'm looking at spring, again, March, April, maybe even into May. After that, I've kind of give up on crabgrass, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I'm going to use the prodiamine, and I'm going to spike it with something like this, cue ball. So cue ball, you see here on the active ingredient, is quinclorac. Okay, so that's what I was looking for. So there's other products out there that have quinclorac in them. This is one solitaire, which is quinclorac and sulfitrazone. Another one that's common that you'll see is drive accelerate. That's drive, and the accelerate is spelled XLR, the number 8. But the cue ball mixed with the prodiamine, to me, gives me a chance to control it. So the prodiamine, if it's already germinated, not doing much good on the crabgrass. But maybe it's early March and it hasn't germinated, or even, you know, depending on where you live, you're further north, maybe it's April and in your area it hasn't germinated. So you're just not sure if it's germinated yet. You might go with the prodiamine, and even if it doesn't help with the crabgrass, it's a fairly inexpensive product. It can help control some other weeds. But because you're concerned that it may have already germinated, you go ahead and put the quinclorac in there, which is your crabgrass post-emergent. So that's the strategy I'm using now. Let me just say that this is by far an inferior strategy to just putting your prodiamine out early in the year. Putting this out in January or February is superior, and I would say greatly superior, to combining these two products in March or April. Okay, so the timing is very important. Get this down ahead of germination, and you're going to have almost 100% crabgrass control in many situations. I mean, you make remarkable turnarounds in a yard. Wait till it after it germinates and put the post-emergent in there with it, and it should definitely help. But in my opinion, in my experience, not nearly as effective as just using the prodiamine by itself in the right timing. Now, if you get into the summer months, when crabgrass is most difficult to control, it's easier to control early in the life cycle and also very late in the life cycle, like as you get on like September. But at that point, I would just advise you, if you're going to have freezing weather coming in the fall, just let the freezing weather kill it and don't even worry about it. But summer, you may consider a product like solitaire, which can be a crabgrass post-emergent. Sometimes when you're doing spot treating crabgrass with a product like this, which you can also work on sedges and things like that, you might want to use methylated seed oil as your surfactant, which can help it be more effective. I wanted to say another thing about crabgrass control. Sometimes you get a yard that's just totally covered in crabgrass, okay? And you may, as a business owner, you may go to that yard and you can see all the dead crabgrass from the year before, and there might be very little actual desirable turf grass. So in my area, that's going to look like usually 95% crabgrass with very little Bermuda grass. But sometimes even just a little Bermuda grass can really spread in that situation. I've got one of my customers in this exact situation as we speak. In that situation, there's a couple things to consider. One may be, hey, if I spray this pre-emergent down in January, February, yes, I'm controlling the crabgrass, but is the pre-emergent going to hinder that the Bermuda grass from spreading and taking over on this lawn? Well, in my experience, and here's my understanding of it, and here's what I've done. My experience has been that if you don't spray a pre-emergent, you're going to have so much crabgrass that the Bermuda's not going to have a chance to spread. So I would rather fall on the side of, let's spray it, get the crabgrass under control. Will it hinder the Bermuda to some degree? Possibly. But I think if you do it early in the year, January, February, let's say, by the time the Bermuda grass really takes off, June, July, August, a lot of the effect of the pre-emergent is already gone, and you're still getting a lot of coverage during those summer months. And I've done this from my own experience. Now, one thing worth mentioning on that, you need to make sure that there is at least some Bermuda grass there. If it literally was all crabgrass and there's no Bermuda grass, and you need to learn to identify what dormant Bermuda grass looks like, then, and I've done this one time too, where the yard had so much crabgrass that there was almost no grass at all. And when I sprayed it, there was virtually no grass left to spread. So in that situation, I think we actually had to get a little bit of sod and get some Bermuda grass started. And it's amazing how much you'll spread in one summer if it doesn't have to compete with all the weeds. All right, so quick recap. Best way to go, use your prodiamine early in the year before it germinates. Get it watered in. You should be good on crabgrass. Not gonna fix all your problems, but it's definitely gonna help on weeds. Let's say you're in those spring months where it may have germinated, but it's still young in the life cycle. You can either go with Dimension, probably like that, it's gonna have some pre and post-emergent activity on crabgrass, or you can do what I'm doing, go with the prodiamine as well as a quinclorac product like Q-Ball or Drive Accelerate. I can put some links in the description to some of these products. And in the summer months, you could go with a quinclorac product to spot treat crabgrass. It's going to be difficult to kill in those months, or you can go with a product like Solitaire, which is going to have quinclorac as well as sulfitrazone in it. The last thing I want to mention about this is you definitely, if you're in a business and you get customers that sign up March, April, May, sometimes the crabgrass may be very small in those months, and the average person may not know that the lawn had crabgrass or may not see it. And what you don't want to happen is to spray the lawn in April, let's say, and you can't really see the crabgrass because it's very small. And then what happens? The customer calls you back in July and says those dreaded words, "My lawn looks worse now than when you started." And even worse than that, they go put it on an online review. "He sprayed my yard and it looked worse than it did when I started. I think he was feeding the weeds," you know, all the stuff. Well, what they don't realize is that crabgrass had been there the whole time. It's just very small and you couldn't see it. So I think it's very important, if you get customers sign up in the spring, and that's the peak time when they sign up, is to explain to them, hey, listen, we are late on getting our crabgrass pre-emergent out this year, and because of that, I'm putting a post-emergent in here. We're going to do our very best to kill this crabgrass. But because we're late, it is possible that you're going to have crabgrass show up this summer, and when you do, we'll try to deal with it then. But next year, we're going to get our pre-emergent out early in the year, and in that situation, you should have virtually no crabgrass in your lawn. So explaining that to the customer and getting them to shake their head and somewhat agree will help in some situations. Now, sometimes the customer forgot you ever had that conversation, and months go by, their yard's got crabgrass, and they complain, and I can't believe I've got crabgrass. What are you doing to my lawn? You know, and you say, hey, don't you remember we had this conversation? You know, so if that happens, it's just not going to be an ideal fit for your business. But I think it's worth having the conversation. I'm Jason Creel. Appreciate you watching the video. If you want to get into weed control and fertilization, you may want to go to lawncarelife.com. That's my website. There's the Weed Control and Fertilization Academy. There's documents, there's pricing charts, there's programs, what to spray on what kind of grass. There's also stuff for people who want to get into mowing, mosquito spraying, lots of resources at lawncarelife.com. I appreciate you guys watching. Let's get out here and knock out the crabgrass, and I'll see you in the next video.